From Oscar Steakhouse, inside the Plaza Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, you're on the corner of Main Street. Welcome to the only podcast produced by and recorded in the Las Vegas Hotel Casino. From gaming to dining to entertainment to sports to Vegas history, this is the place to be for the inside scoop, because this is the place to be downtown. Now, here's Plaza CEO Jonathan Jossel.
So welcome back to downtown Las Vegas. We're here on the corner of Main Street. Fascinating subject today. As always, we're 170 episodes into this podcast, I should say, over the last few years. And one subject that always comes up is the idea of the Black Book.
Right.
People, when they think about Las Vegas, they think about the mob, they think about the history. This kind of encompasses a lot of that.
And we've never really touched deep into the conversation. We've been touch and go.
With Oscar many times. We've touched on it, I think, with Sandra Douglas when she came on our podcast. So we have touched on it. But interestingly enough, I've been pushing Oscar to help me to discuss the Black Book. I was actually going to try to do an episode of the podcast with Joey Cusimano, who's one of the few living people still in the Black Book. Mm-hmm. And we got pretty close to setting it up a few months ago, and then a wise man and a mentor of mine, I won't mention him on this, told me probably not a good idea for a licensee to be doing a podcast with a guy like Joey, who is banned from coming into the Plaza. Now, I could meet him at the Smith Center, I can meet him at the Las Vegas Country Club, but I can't meet him at the Plaza because he's in the Black Book. Right. I wasn't thinking of it as that. I was just thinking of it as it's a podcast. We're going to tell the story. So I thought that was interesting. And then obviously I started thinking, well, who else could we get on to help discuss this? And then as of today, as we're recording this thing in the news, there's a and it's probably one of the first times I remember in a long time that somebody has been put forward to go into the Black Book. Right. And that is a gentleman by the name of Matthew Boyer, who we can discuss what he did. I don't actually know details of what he did, but perfectly topical subject. So why don't you introduce our guest today who's ready to go?
Yeah, so today we're joined by James Taylor, former Chief of Enforcement at the Nevada Gaming Control Board. James spent 28 years investigating casino crime, organized cheating, and illegal gambling, and overseen enforcement of Nevada's most infamous regulatory tool, the list of excluded persons, better known as the Black Book. James, welcome to On the Corner of Main Street.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's good to be in the Plaza, but good to be in Oscar Steak. I hope you got his permission for me to be in here.
He knows you're here, and we were going to have him come here and debate you on this stuff, but we decided that you tell it from a different story and from a different perspective, and we want to cover that story today. And good. We've never had somebody in your position or your history tell the story, so fascinating to have you here, and we're excited to do this. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
I have a lot of history with this.
So, James, I guess first, before we kind of dive into the Black Book, how did you end up in gaming enforcement?
I moved to Vegas in '91 to work for the federal government. I was a federal investigator. They recruited me out of college and put me down here, and I worked 3 years for the Office of Federal Investigations, and then our whole agency was dissolved under the reinvention of government under Bill Clinton. So we were the original Doged agency, and I like staying in Vegas. I had opportunities to move with the government somewhere else, and take a different role somewhere else, but I like being here. I like the history. I'm from Utah. We were down here a lot as kids. My parents loved coming down here.
Whereabouts in Utah?
I'm from Tooele, which is near Salt Lake.
Okay.
I went to school in Ogden, and
I just drove up to Park City, so I drove through all the small towns of Provo and different places on the way up.
Very nice.
I know a few of the small
beautiful
towns.
Place to grow up and to live. A lot of outdoor stuff. It's nice up there. But I've loved it here. So I wanted to stay. I was looking for a job. I ended up parking cars, valet at Bally's, and heard about an opportunity at the board, and on a whim applied, and I got selected for a position. Went to the police academy and started my career in '95 with the Gaming Control Board.
What was it like when it first started? Like when you first started, what was?
So back then,
91.
you mean what was the
The
city
Gaming
like?
Control Board.
Yeah, it's the same as it is now. We have several different divisions. I was hired for the enforcement division, which is the law enforcement branch of the Gaming Control Board, and we're Category 2 police officers trained as Category 1. We have 90 agents. I still say we like I'm there. I've been retired now for 3 years, but it's in my blood. I lived it, breathed it for 28 years, worked with some great people there, had great stories, great cases, seized millions and millions of dollars, put a lot of people in jail. I had a great career with the board.
You were 28 years there.
Yes.
And what prepared you to go into that? You said you were doing valet before that, and then you'll work with the
Yeah,
government.
I did 3 years as a federal investigator, and
Oh, as a
then,
federal
and then
investigator.
when I was looking for a job, my friend ran valet at Bally, so he offered me a position, parking cars. So, and I did that for just a short time while I was getting ready to, find something else and get into state work.
And who did you report to at the board? What was the structure?
So back then I was an agent and the senior agent supervisor all the way up to a chief, who then reported to the chairman of the board, who I think was Bill Bible back in those days.
Okay. So me, as a gaming licensee now, I had an agent investigate me.
Right.
Would you have done the investigation?
No, that's the investigations division. So
Okay.
they handle all of the pre-licensing investigations, but once someone or some entity is licensed, then it's the enforcement division that enforces it to make sure you're doing what you need to do. If you get in trouble, it'd be the enforcement division that would come in and investigate you. Then the investigations division might call you forward for licensing again, or for to look at your license again if something comes up, or I guess the board would take your license first, but that's a different division.
And in 28 years, were you one of the longest tenured agents? I mean, do people do 28 years at the Gaming
Yeah,
Control Board?
we had agents do more than that. Yeah.
Wow.
It's
You must have really seen some interesting stories, some
Yeah,
interesting people, and really seen the city change a
the
lot.
industry changed so much. I mean, in the early days, I laugh all the time because my first arrest was a guy using a yo-yo on a slot machine. Because the machines back then were less sophisticated than they are today. I don't even understand these slot machines today, I don't even know a winning combination. You put money in and it might give you something, but back then they accepted coins, and so we had a lot of people that would we call them stringers, or they used a yo-yo that would bounce a quarter up and down in the coin acceptor, and it would just keep registering. So that was my first arrest, if you can imagine. Back then, machines got a lot more sophisticated over the years, stopped taking coins, then we had to investigate different types of crimes that people were doing on the machines.
And it was mostly at that point, because you joined in the mid-90s, it was mostly on the crime that they were doing as opposed to organized crime.
No, we had organized crime in the city. I took over the organized crime squad at the board in '97. There were about maybe 15 made guys that lived in the city then.
Really?
And so I actually embedded myself with Metro's organized crime unit, and we started surveilling people. And I was actually brought over from we had field services and we had our special investigation section. I was brought over to that section to work specifically Black Book cases. So in about '96, I took over. I call it the Black Book. It's technically the list of excluded persons, but I took over all of that in '96, and nobody had been put in the book for several years up to that point. But that was my main focus, was to investigate people, surveil people,
Okay.
look at people.
So you mentioned Black Book, and Gary's got some really good questions on the Black Book. We're going to come there in 1 second, or 1 minute. You said there was still 15 people in organized crime, or made men.
Made men.
Made men, which is somebody.
It's gone
done
through the
this.
inductment ceremony.
Right. The way I understood it is maybe in the 70s, 80s, you could drive down the strip and point to each building and say which family owned it. Back then, what were these 15 guys doing? Were they still involved in the casinos? Or
No, the last skim case that was proven. I mean, I hope they weren't involved during those days. But the last skim case that was proven was 1990 or 91 at the Continental, and that was the Gambinos.
Okay.
But that was such a low-level scam. It wasn't like the old days when they were taking the money out of the count rooms, hiding it in briefcases, suitcases, or some elaborate scheme. The 90s scam was a guy working there. They had another guy come up. He'd open the slot machine, and they would dump the quarters into a bag, and out they'd go.
Right.
And so that's the last true mob-involved scam or anything that really involved
Okay.
casinos. Now, we knew that there were casino hosts, and that was part of our job, was to figure out when these guys came to town, because not just the 15 guys that were living here, but we were an open city, and so a lot of the made guys would come here, and I worked a lot of Kansas City cases and became friends with the FBI in Kansas City and the Kansas City Police, and Boston, same, and New York. So when they knew of a guy that was coming to Vegas,
Yeah.
we would set up at the airport, watch him get off a plane, and we would surveil him while they were here.
Who were the main
Find
guys
out.
from Kansas City?
Well, I put Willie Comisano Jr. I did his Black Book. Tony Ripe Savella, I did his. Pete Rabasi, that was a fun one. Before my time, there were a lot of Kansas City guys that went in because they were the ones that were really involved with the Argent skim.
Okay.
With the fruit line.
Well, I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit. Savellas were the people that Oscar represented, the father.
Yes.
So we'll talk about that. But okay, so the Black Book. You governed the Black Book when you were at the Gaming Control Board. That was under your purview.
I was assigned to do the Black Book cases.
And when did the Black Book get invented?
So it was 1960. The history is that I think the governor of the state at the time was just trying to show that they're taking some kind of action because the news was bad about Vegas and how the mob was running it. The Gaming Control Board was formed. The Gaming Commission would come a little bit later. So they just put a letter out to the licensees. It had 11 names on it, and they were all mob guys saying to every licensee, these people are not allowed to enter the casino. And that's how the Black Book was formed.
It wasn't a book at first, it was just a list.
It was a list.
Yeah.
And really, I don't know if it was really ever a book and more of a pamphlet. I mean, there's only 37 people in the Black Book today. There's only been, I mean, that's one of the misconceptions, there's only been 80 people,
79
maybe
or 80.
79 or 80,
yeah.
that have been excluded
Well,
in the history of the book.
79, but if Matthew Boyer gets put in, that would be number 80, from what I read,
Yeah.
but okay.
I think there's a couple of them that were nominated and not ever actually put
Formally
in.
put in.
You know, two of mine actually were in that category. But I was involved in 34 of the cases, 20 personally and 14 as a supervisor.
So it was the governor in the 60s whose idea it was to do this to help clean up the image of the industry.
right.
And how did he create, sorry.
Oh, well, there was no due process or anything. It
I was gonna
literally
say-
was just putting a list out saying, don't welcome.
How
these
did he
guys."
choose the 11? The lucky
Well,
11?
I don't know, but I'm sure it was the people that were involved in, skimming to that point. And of course, the creation of the Gaming Control Board didn't stop mob involvement in casinos here. The bigger cases came in the 70s and even into the 80s. But the creation of the Gaming Control Board set up a regulatory structure to investigate this stuff to then drive them out. By the time I became, part of any of this in '95, I think the board had done a pretty good job of getting the mob out of the industry, but not necessarily out of the city itself. So there have been those, though, that we put in the Black Book that then moved. Rabasti was one of those cases. He lived here for years. If you want me to tell stories, but
Sure,
he lived here for years, lived at Spanish Trails, drove a Jaguar. We never knew really what he did. And so he actually would call me once in a while. He was really afraid of going into the Black Book, and so he wanted to stay on my good graces and stay out of the book. And so he would call me, not as an informant, just call me to prove to me that he was a good guy and wasn't worthy of this. So I wouldn't meet him. I would never meet him in person because I was actually teasing him when he would call me. I'd say, well, how was so and so? I saw you meeting with him yesterday, or how was this restaurant? I saw you there last week, and it would drive him crazy. And he who are you? I just remember a few conversations like that. And so I would send other agents to go meet with him, but. I remember one time I was with Metro. We were driving down the strip, and we were actually going to Treasure Island because we'd heard that Fred Pacenti was in town, who we were also interested in putting him in the Black Book. He's a ex-Chicago police officer that got arrested, was working with the mob in Chicago, and so we were heading there. And as we were driving down the boulevard, John Hannon, was the Metro detective I was with, said, "Hey, look who we're following." We've probably been following him for 6 or 7 blocks, but it was Rabasi's Jaguar. We hadn't even realized it. So Hannon sped up, and we got door to door with them, and we both looked over at the same time. Rabasi and his passenger looked over at us, and at that point, we both knew the surveillance was over. And in his passenger seat was Joey Ragusa, who I had never met before, but I had seen his picture on all the organized crime charts, and so Ragusa being in town was a big deal to me. Joey Rags, as he was known on the Kansas City street. So,
Wow.
So I made some calls and found out he was staying at the Stardust, and so we went to the Stardust, and he was with Dominic Messina, another Kansas City associate. Ragusa's a made guy, but Messina wasn't. And I had seen Messina a couple of times before with Willie Comisano I'm probably getting confusing here, but I had seen Messina before with Willie Comisano at the Rio and a couple other places. So he was of interest to us. And also with him was a kid not a kid, but a guy we didn't know, and his name was Vince Piccone, who was on the charts, but I'd never had anything to do with them. And so Metro has this...
you say the charts, like, it's a watch list of people that you're interested in?
A lot of the law enforcement agencies put out their organized crime charts. The FBI has an organized crime chart, or used to, with family tree, basically. Who's the boss? Who's the underboss? Who are the soldiers? Who are the associates? Who are the business associates? So, he was on the chart. So we had this little cell staying at Treasure Island. At the same time, we had the Chicago group staying at Stardust. We had another group at Treasure Island.
And what year is this?
But Metro, what year? 97 or 8?
It's not even that long ago.
And so it seems like a long time ago to me. So Metro has an ordinance that if you're a felon and you've come to town, you have so many hours to register. If you're going to be here over, they probably still have the ordinance, but if you're going to be in town over 72 hours or something, you have to go down to Metro and register as a felon visiting the city. So we use that a lot with these guys that came to town, and we would watch them until that 72 hours or 48, whatever it was, and then we'd pick them up if they didn't. Normally, they didn't even know it was an ordinance. Most people don't. But we picked up Piccone and put him in the holding room and asking him questions. And what are you doing in Vegas? I don't know. I know, I'm just there having a good time. Who are you with? I'm not with anybody. I'm just here by myself having a good time. And about that same time, the speaker, the overhead speaker says, "Mr. Piccone, please pick up a house phone and dial 0 for an operator. Your party is looking for you." And it was just hilarious that he had just told us he's alone. So we took him downtown and booked him, and it's just crazy. And that same week we had Vincent Savella staying at Bally's, and he's the son of Tony Savella, who was the boss of the family at the time. Now Vincent's the underboss of the family. But so just in 1 week, we had so many different surveillances going on and people we were interested in the city. And so back to your original question, this is what we would do. We would try to build intelligence files. What are they doing here? Are they really just here having a good time, or are they meeting with people? And we would be interested if they're meeting with casino hosts or meeting with casino executives or what they're doing.
So what you're saying is it's not a good idea for me to meet with one of the guys in the black book and do a podcast with them.
Strongly suggest that you don't.
Okay, good advice. Thank you.
Might make good TV or podcasting.
I can do it for clicks. It's like the people that take selfies, like with the shark in the background.
You got to do it via Zoom or something, right?
Okay. No, it sounds like I shouldn't do it at all.
Yeah.
The relationship. But if it was created in the 60s and you were dealing with this in the 90s, is it fair to say maybe it wasn't that effective in deterring organized crime for that 30 years?
No, it's not. I don't know if it's a deterrence of organized crime, but it's a deterrence of that person to be in a licensed gaming establishment. It would not look right if Tony Spilotro, with all of his notoriety, is walking through a casino. It just would not look good.
As Oscar would say, his alleged notoriety.
Alleged, of course. But I wasn't involved in any of the cases where somebody did not have a felony conviction. That's one of the criteria, but it's only one of the criteria, and it's an and or in the statute as a felony conviction. But I never looked at anybody that didn't have at least.
So that's that's an interesting segue into. Oscar's often used his platforms and our dinner series and other things to say that the Black Book is unconstitutional. But you're saying that the cases you did, they always had a felony, in which case they had already been convicted of something and had a process.
And most of them had something to do with a casino, whether the crime was in the casino or not. But so my last case was Weatherspoon, and it was one that I worked on for a long time. I was actually chief when he got put in the Black Book, and it was important to me that we do it. And he was not a cheat. He's not a mob guy. He's a pimp. But he had been a problem for the licensees. He'd been arrested, for beating women for not making enough money in the casinos. He'd been in the casinos trying to recruit women to work for him. He was a nuisance to the licensees, and the statute reads, if they pose a threat to the interest of the state or licensed gaming or both. So in my mind, he is the current threat to what's going on. And we made a shift back in about 2007 as well, because when I took over the book, most of everybody in there were organized crime figures. There were a few cheaters, more than a few, but there were some cheaters. And then in 2000, and that's how I kept it for a long time, but in 2007, we morphed it into more of these nuisance crimes, people that would come into the casino and steal chips. And I'm not talking a $100 chip.
Right.
Like Tasia Musa, who was the first one that we did in this category, he would routinely steal $5,000 chips from people. We had dozens of cases on him where he'd be arrested. He'd even go to jail. He'd get out of prison, and we finally did him for the Black Book. The industry came to me actually and asked me, is there a way we can look at people like this? I know he's not a cheater, he's not a mobster, but he is really what we deal with all the time. And so I went to the board and said, I really feel like it needs to morph into something else. What's the current threat on the strip or in the industry? And so they were all supportive of it. And that's why we put Tasia Musa in. And then Joseph Moody was right after that. He was a guy, we had over 100 instances of him, all elderly victims that were at Tito kiosks. So they'd get their Tito ticket, they'd go up.
For anyone that doesn't know, listens, Tito is a ticket in, ticket out.
Right, yeah. Machines don't spit out the cash anymore. You have to take the ticket. The casino hopes you put in another machine, but you can take it to a redemption center and it will spit out the cash and redeem it. So it takes a few seconds for that to work. You put your ticket in and it has to calculate it, and then it'll spit out the money like an ATM. So Moody had it all timed out perfectly, knew how many seconds it would take, and about when the money comes out, he would tap the person, almost always elderly, on the shoulder and ask them a question, getting them to turn around. And when they turn around, he would get behind them and take their cash, put it in his pocket, and walk away, thanking them for their directions. When they turn back around, it says, take your money, thanks for playing, but their money's gone, and they don't know what happened. So by the time they get a slot tech or somebody to come over and look at the machine, Moody's out.
They think
Moody's
they
out
get
the door.
stuck in the machine.
Yeah, they don't know what
that
happened,
quick.
but it takes a while to get a slot tech to come over and investigate it or look at surveillance. By then, Moody's,
He must have done this a lot of times.
a lot,
for it
over
to hit your
100
radar.
times.
100 times.
100. Wow. And so, again, went to the board. This is somebody that poses an interest to the state. We don't want visitors here from other states, really our own citizens in casinos, to be feeling like they're going to be victimized by somebody like this. And when these chip thieves were out of control, I mean, we had a guy take $67,000 off of a craps game. Some of them would just grab and run. Some of them would just secretly, take a chip off a table. The person didn't even know it had happened.
But is there a threshold to these crimes? Because we have it regularly where somebody will leave a voucher in the machine while they go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Or they leave money in the machine and then they put the chair up to signal that
Yeah.
this machine's reserved, but they're leaving their money there and somebody will take the money and leave. But if you're opportunistic, it sounds like you wouldn't end up in the black book, but if you do it repetitively, that's where you run the risk then of
Yeah, if it's somebody that we're going to have, that the board is going to deal with a lot of times, it's going to be somebody that's going to rise to that level. Now, the book has always been a small, manageable book. That's what almost every chairman told me from the beginning, is they don't want a mass number of black book cases. They want to keep it unique and exclusive and manageable. Now, Atlantic City has an excluded persons list. They have 500 people on it.
Wow.
Now,
Do all the casino jurisdictions have?
I think most of them have
excluded
something
persons?
similar or did at one time. I know, I'm pretty sure Missouri did. I know Michigan was looking at it when they legalized gaming. But we didn't want to overburden the licensees either. We wanted to keep it manageable and exclusive. So it was always kind of the worst of the worst is the way we would look at it.
And wasn't that, you were probably at the Gaming Control Board when this happened, but wasn't there the two dealers at Bellagio that were
Yeah.
dealing craps? Didn't they go in the black book?
Yeah, I was supervisor of that case. My agent, Ken Yergalon, was the case agent. So all four, the two players on the game and the two dealers all went. They went to prison first. But when they got out of prison, then we did the black book.
I mean, that's massive. That's 5% of the history of the black book in one case.
Well, yeah. And the reason it took, I think, 4 years to get them in the book is that if somebody's going to prison, we're not going to put them in the book. We can't say that they're a threat to the gaming industry if they have no access to casinos or gaming to be a threat of. So we always waited till they got out. And that's why some of them were missed. You know, there were probably a lot of people in the history that were deserved of the Black Book that were never included because they went and did some prison time, and when they got out, like Nick Rash was in the book. He was probably the biggest slot cheat in history. And in fact, I'm sure he is. He was convicted of a $10 million fraud back in the 80s. And then he gets out of prison. He doesn't go in the Black Book. And so in 97, we started another case on him where we convict him of $6 million fraud.
Now he's in the
And
Black
then he went in the Black Book.
And once you're in the Black Book, you can never get out. Well, no one has ever gotten out.
Nobody has. There is a statute or a regulation that allows for somebody to petition the commission to be removed. And there's been one petition that I'm aware of, and it's actually pending. The commission has 90 days to act on that, if I remember the statute or the regulation right. And there was a man that's been in the book longer than my tenure, Frankie Citro, has requested. Now, I heard for years that he was going to do it. People would actually call me and ask, you know, you think he has a chance, or why don't you take him out of the book? And I would tell all of them he needs to petition the commission, which he would never do. And then finally, after I retired, he did petition the commission. I don't think they've acted on that, and I'll be interested to see how they handle it. But nobody else that I'm aware of has actually been all the way put in. We've nominated a few that didn't actually go in. But I don't believe anybody has gone in and then just been removed.
I want to say there was a guy I always used to see. I haven't been there in a few years now, but at the Italian American Club, I think it's Frankie Citro. Do you have a picture of him?
It'd be on our website. I still say our. It would be on the board's website.
I want to say that I would meet him at the Italian American Club. And
kind of a funny guy and outgoing, and I have no problem with him. I think
now someone like that, does it say on the website what they're in the Black Book for?
Yeah, when it became more formal, there was a process. It became an actual book that would be a pamphlet, I guess, that would be printed, and it had a black cover.
Yeah.
And then in my time, it was a silver color cover, but it was real. I mean, we put 14 people in just a few years after I took over, and so, or 20, I think, went in just short time, and so somebody always had to take out pages, put pages in, so they just stopped printing the book altogether and put it online. And so they asked me if I would write a bio for each of the persons in there, and I actually thought it was still in there, and I looked the other day and they'd taken those out, so there is no bio of each
That's
person.
what I thought, yeah, because I remember thinking I met this guy and somebody had told me he was in the Black Book, and you don't meet someone in the Black Book very often.
So I haven't met him ever. I had a, I don't know to tell this story, but we actually had an employee at the board that was out of the nightclub on the Strip many, many years ago. And she came to me on a Monday and said, hey, I was at this nightclub on Friday night, and I was kind of talking to this guy, and he was trying to dance with me, and when he asked me where I worked, I said the Gaming Control Board, and he just turned around and ran. So I showed her. I figured it was probably somebody in the Black Book, and I showed her, and she pointed to him and goes, "That's him. That's the one. That's the one." I could never prove it, and it may not be true, but it was just hilarious that if that is a true story, it's hilarious that he was out at that nightclub that night, and the one person he's trying to dance with is.
An agent?
She wasn't an agent, but she worked for the board.
Speaking of the strip club, I know we talk a lot about the casinos, but so for the people that are still alive and that are in the Black Book, does that include any places that have gaming? So like a PT Pubs or a Dottie's or other places that have gaming? Like how does that register?
So that is another misperception about the book, because you're allowed to enter slots-only establishments. So you're barred from non-restricted licensees that are not slots only. So like the Eureka down on Sahara, I don't know if it's still open, but John Conti would hang out in there all the time. I get calls from the public, he can go in there. But
can he play?
Yes, you're allowed.
Okay.
So if you're a slot cheat, though, that's pretty good.
Exactly, and that has come up many times in in the board and commission meetings is like, how do we prevent them from gambling when they go in? But you can't bar somebody from going to a 7-Eleven, going to the airport, grocery
Albertsons.
stores.
Yeah.
You can't bar somebody from that. So
Right.
I understand why it was written the way it was written, but that was when it was all mobsters. Now it's cheaters and thieves and people
But
like
is it
that.
this is an interesting distinction then. Is it a unrestricted license or is it a place that operates just slot machines? Because now Golden Gate
yeah, that's
would
what I was
be
thinking of.
technically, you could go in there. They only have slot machines.
I believe technically, I'm not an attorney, but I believe technically if it's slots only, they could go in there.
Interesting.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
So, but if any of them are listening to this podcast, I don't suggest it.
And
to go in there and cheat.
well, I know Joey Cusumano does hang out at the Las Vegas Country Club. I've seen him there when I play golf
Playing
from time
tennis.
to time.
That's
and
the only
tennis.
one of the only times I've seen him was in there playing tennis too.
And so now, who does the onus fall on? If I as the licensee, am obligated to not let somebody in the black book come in here. But if they're disguised or you don't know it's them, like I don't know what Frankie Citro looks like. If he walked in here, I wouldn't know it was him. Is that obligation on me though to ensure that our team do not allow those people in? Because I know
if-
security have pictures of them and our cage has pictures
Yeah,
of them.
your surveillance and security should be well aware of all of them. But if they're going to sneak in a disguise and you don't know them, I guess the key would be, do you know? Are you catering to them? Like we had Doug Barr was in the Laughlin casinos, several of them, and had a player's card in his name. At this, that is a problem. That they catering to him, giving him points and comps. And
Right.
That is a big problem. If you welcomed him in, and that's what happened to Frank Sinatra, because Sam Giancana was in the book, and the boss of the Chicago family.
Yeah.
And Sinatra was a licensee up at Tahoe, but he didn't care about. He cared
rules.
more about his friendship with Giancana than he did about regulations and all of that. So he allowed Giancana to actually live when he was in trouble, live in the hotel, and the board found out about it and actually took Sinatra's license. That's why he wasn't a licensee.
That's how he lost his license
That's how he
through
lost his license.
relationship with Giancana.
Allowing Giancana to stay at the hotel, knew it, and catered to it. And I think that would be the distinction. I can't speak for the board anymore, but if I was still the chief and somebody brought me a case and somebody, snuck in and had the disguise,
Right.
I wouldn't think that they would go after a licensee unless they knew it.
So if somebody that is in the book comes into one of these establishments and they get caught, what is the next step? So surveillance identifies them on a
Yeah.
blackjack table.
They
What
can-
is the next
So
process?
The reg and the statute says you should ask them to leave if they remain. But it's a gross misdemeanor. If somebody re-enters after being barred,
Right.
it is a gross misdemeanor. So they can be grabbed, and you should. One of the things is you need to call the board or whatever law enforcement agency is enforcing that area.
Okay.
So it needs to be reported, obviously, if you see them on property.
Okay.
And the only way, again, to come out of it is to die. As of now. 79 people have gone in. How many people are still in it today?
37, I believe.
37, of which I read only one is female.
One is female, and some of those are deceased. Some of the ones in the book.
Oh, and they're still in it, though. They haven't been
So the
removed.
board has to be able to prove the death by either a death certificate or some other means. And so I know Michael Balsamo is probably deceased, but we had it on record that he was going to disappear. He absconded from jail, didn't appear to his court. He put his family's home up for bail, and he disappeared. But we had heard that he was going to do that, and he later was found in Argentina. We were told he had cancer and was dying, but we have tried. Back in the day, we tried with the State Department, everybody to try to get us proof. So he's still in the book all these years later, but he's likely deceased. A couple of the Kansas City guys that I put in are still in because they haven't got the death certificates yet. Berbasti, and I'm sure Comisano is dead too. He was one of the top-ranking guys at Kansas City family. One of my first cases actually was Willie Comisano Jr.
What did he do?
He was a mob guy his conviction was for messing with a witness, trying to get her to lie to a grand jury. that was his conviction. But there's a lot of stories about him and his relationships with the mob back there. And there's a wiretap where they say something that he did. You know, Oscar wouldn't like any of that, but he was coming here a lot. He was out here, not monthly, but close to that. We were always on him when he did, or hoped to be on him when he did. He was in town the night Herbie Blitzstein was killed. We had the surveillance on him that night. We broke our surveillance off about 2 a.m, actually, when he went up his hotel room at the Rio. And then the next morning I find out that Herbie had been killed overnight. And so I went back to the Rio to look at the video, and we'd put him up into his room, and we'd called our surveillance at 2, but at 3 he'd come back down the elevator and left the Rio. So I called Metro Homicide and said, I don't know if this is anything, but you know, one of the Kansas City guys is in town and was out of pocket. And it didn't turn out to be Kansas City.
Oh, it wasn't connected.
It wasn't connected to Kansas City that we know of. It was, you know, a different crime family had put the hit out on Herbie. And like 7 people, including some, Sino was part of that. Steve Sino his moniker was the Well. His wife didn't like that a whole lot when I put that in the newspaper, that we'd put Steve the Well in the book. She called me and gave me the business. I thought everybody called him that, but apparently
Steve
the Well.
Steve
He
the
was
Well.
huge. He was 300 or 400 pound guy. He's
Yeah.
probably 400 pound guy. He was gigantic, and he had convictions. So we were targeting him for the Black Book, and so he was part of that deal where, if you know the story with Herbie Blitzstein, another crime family was going to take over Blitzstein's loan sharking and auto, insurance fraud. I don't want to get into all of that, but so they were going to take over that business. So they whacked Herbie, probably the last mob murder in the city, and Sino was one of the ones that kind of sanctioned that. So
Okay.
we put him in the book, and then we have to go serve them their notice that they can appeal it. So he had just been picked up and was at the North Las Vegas jail, and I had to go there and serve him his papers. So they pulled him out of a line and explained who I was and what I was doing, and he was all pissed off, and he said I ruined his lunch. And he waddled away from me.
Herbie, I'm pretty sure when we opened this restaurant, we had a menu item on the menu called Fat Herbie.
So yeah, Fat Herbie also had that moniker. I was talking about Steve the Well.
Yeah, I know, but I think Fat Herbie was also the same.
He was Fat Herbie, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how law enforcement always referred to him. I don't know if the
But you never, I think Oscar must have represented him or been friends with him. You never came into contact with Oscar because you came after he had retired and was ready running for mayor, I guess.
So Oscar, he did represent Tony Savella with his Black Book. That was my first Black Book case, was Tony Savella. And so, Tony was the boss of the Kansas City family at the time. Now, he had been convicted of the skim with his uncle and brother, who had both been bosses of the Kansas City family, Carl and Nick Savella. Mm-hmm. His dad was Carl, uncle is Nick. So the family had passed from Nick to Carl to Tony, if you want to keep up with the family history. So when Tony got out of prison, we did him for the Black Book as well, because that is another one of the criteria to put somebody in the Black Book, is to have had a hidden ownership or a hidden interest in a casino. So that was my first case, was Tony. And so he did not ask for a hearing, but the day the commission was going to just bless the board's action, the Oscar showed up and asked to speak, and they gave him a platform to speak.
Okay.
They still voted Tony in, but that's really my first interaction with Oscar.
He must have been pretty ferocious back then.
Yeah. My second interaction with Oscar was during the Nick Rash case, and he didn't know I was watching, but Oscar
Nick Rash.
Nick Rash.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it later, but Nick Rash, we have. It was a $6 million fraud case. It was my case, but like I said before, he had been convicted of a $10 million fraud case, all cheating related, fraudulent jackpots in the casinos using a handheld computer that they break into the machine and download memory onto the machine that would then create a jackpot. And so we had a long 6 or 7 month investigation in connection with the FBI as well, a joint investigation. And so when we finally arrested everybody, all of the mob attorneys represented one of them, and Nick Rash was represented. I don't remember which one Oscar actually represented in that group, but the day they showed up for their initial appearance, all the mob attorneys were lined up, all of the defendants, and one of their wives was also charged, but we didn't want to hold her overnight. We wanted her to go home. And so Oscar was in the hallway with her, and I wasn't eavesdropping. He was talking normal, but he told her, whatever you do, Joan, do not speak on the phone. Do not talk about any business on the phone. And I had to laugh because we did have wiretaps on their phone. We've been listening to their phones for 3 months. We also had a bug in their house, in Bulgarino's house. And we had purposely did our arrests 2 days before our wiretap warrant expired. So we did our arrest hoping it would trigger conversations at the house to get even more evidence later. And so standing in the hallway that day, hearing him say that, I thought, well, there goes that idea. But she went home and just started calling up everybody she knew and started talking about everybody being arrested.
You know what's amazing? And now I understand it why Oscar's, when I first started doing business with Oscar, which was 2012, 2013, he would always say, don't talk about this on the phone. I was like, do you think people are still listening to you? But maybe they were still listening to him back
Oh, yeah.
back then.
All right.
So I had one other interaction with him, which I was technically undercover at the time. He had a movie called Mob Law that came out, and they had the premiere at the Orleans Casino. And so it's featured in that movie was several mob guys, a couple of whom were in the Black Book. And we had heard from an informant that at least one of them was going to show up. So we thought we better be there in case he does show up. We'll arrest him, and that will, we'll try to do it quietly so that's not the news of the night. But we did want to make sure none of the mob guys or the Black Book guys showed up at the premiere. So none of them did, but I just pretended like I had a press pass. I had a notepad and was taking notes. My agent that was with me, Dick Casto, he had a real nice camera, so he was my photographer. And so we were able to take pictures of just about everybody coming in. And then there was this quiet moment where Oscar was standing by himself by the concession stand. And so I had bought a Mob Law t-shirt, and I had bought the VHS tape. So Oscar was standing by himself, so I slipped on the t-shirt, and I went up to him with my Mob Law movie and said, hey, would you sign this for me? And so he was so kind, he signs it. But just as he does that, Channel 5 News went live. And they did a remote shot from the Orleans, at this premiere of this movie. And so I was hoping it wasn't a live shot, that they were just filming. And I just kind of slunk out of view. And then a few minutes later, I get a text from my boss going, what the hell are you doing out there? I thought you were working undercover tonight. You were just on, everybody in the Valley just saw you on Channel 5 News.
You were doing research.
So I have a screenshot. I'll send it to you later so you can include it. I have a screenshot of me and Oscar standing there in my Mob Law t-shirt.
Amazing.
Wow.
So
what was the last time you spoke to Oscar?
Well, I really don't speak with him.
Or interacted with him?
Yeah, I see him at the Mob Museum. I've been on the advisory board of the Mob Museum for about a dozen years or so.
Okay.
And he's quite involved there. I mean, he's responsible for the Mob Museum. He's a great speaker and a lot of fun to listen to. And so I see him all the time at the different functions for the advisory board or the board of directors. And I don't know if he really knows who I am, but he would know me by sight. But I don't know if he would know that's the guy that, that I went up against.
Should we give him a call? Do you think you could do that?
Can do that, absolutely.
He does have
Oscar, how are you, my friend?
No, it's okay. So my friend Jonathan asked whether or not I'd like to be on the program with you, and I said, surely. I think it'd be a lot of fun, but we won't get into areas that might put you in some kind of difficulty. We both have very strong feelings, I'm sure, about the Black Book or the list of excluded persons, and I jumped at the chance to take a shot with you and see how we do.
Well, I still have your autographed copy of the Black Book. You remember your book signing of Mice and Men with John L. Smith, and I showed up with my Black Book and you signed it?
I sure do, and I'll tell you something. I don't know whether you've ever seen the book by the two professors.
Oh yeah, I was at that too. When you introduced them at the UNLV, I went to that too.
Well, that's quite a book. That's probably uh, the best exposition that I know of as far as the Black Book, and it's now, I guess, about 15 years old, and really is as relevant today as it was back in the old days. And, I never had the pleasure of meeting the authors, but I thought it was very well done, and it was very well documented, and they had a very interesting theory that there may have been a little bit of
Oscar, how much of your like day-to-day work revolved around the Black Book?
It depended on the time and the client, of course. I think I represented more people at one time, but not even today, as far as the record is concerned, of people who were either nominated for it, and in the beginning they weren't even nominated. They were just placed in the book, and then through the years, the book became more refined, not necessarily more accepted by me or my clients, but they provided at least the semblance of a hearing, although I felt that the gaming regulators really were very rude. They thought it was a joke. I remember one night with Cusimano that one of the regulators, and no reason to mention names today, but he had a son who was going to be playing softball, and he made fun of Cusimano even contesting his placement in the book, and we had to call a timeout. The hearing, I believe, was on a Saturday, and the whole weekend was set aside for it. And it was a real battle, let's put it that way. It was the best of fights. Harry Reid and myself really became very disenchanted with one another as a result of that, and conduct which I felt was unbefitting. And I would say quite a bit of time, Johnny.
But your time is different than mine. The last one that you appeared at was my first one, actually, and that was Anthony Savella. He didn't ask for a hearing, but you showed up in Carson City that day, and they let you speak anyway. If I remember that right, that'd be back in '96 or '7. That was my first case. So you had a long history of appearing before the board and commission before me, but I don't remember you representing any of them after that.
I don't recall. I know that I represented them in court fights.
Oh, I know that.
But that would make sense, Oscar, because you became mayor in 2001, right? So I mean,
In 1999.
oh, yeah. So the '97 probably would have been your last.
So it's a different history. That like he was saying, it was done differently then. Like the first 11 were just put in with a letter to the licensees. It wasn't even there was no due process. There was nothing, which even I agree that wasn't right, and that's why the process changed, and they had the right to have the hearings.
And Oscar, I assume your clients, you were worried about getting them out of lifetime in jail or death sentences. Black Book would have been a good result.
For my clients?
Yeah.
Instead of jail?
Yeah.
No.
It's two tracks.
In a way, in my mind, and I don't know how far we want to go, I thought it was devoid of constitutional protections. And I took it very, very personally that in this country, somebody, where they provided the necessity for a hearing or the nomination process, if it were followed through and was as good as it sounded on paper, until that time, I felt that it was an abuse of everything that I had stood for and everything that I had learned in law school as far as protecting individual rights. And to me, I consider it to be a mark of Cain because they were barred from entering any place. Did
you ever get anyone off of not out of it, but did you ever go to a hearing where you were able to convince them not to do it?
No, because with Mike, although I came pretty close with one of them, or maybe even two of them, because of the doctrine of latches, which means that the gaming regulators waited too long to nominate them for inclusion. And one or two, I remember Piccoli in particular.
Who was that?
Bob Piccoli.
Ron.
He was on the board. Oh, no, he was on the commission, I guess. And the colleague said he didn't feel it was right putting them in the book.
Who was the client though that went in? Who was the?
I don't recall specifically which one, but he said they waited so long to do something about the client that it was unfair to put him into the book years later when he wasn't even frequenting the casinos or in the job that caused him to be placed in it. But that bothered me greatly because I guess the two things my parents used to preach to me about is the only thing that they as parents could give me was a good education and leave a good name. And I felt that with these fellows who were placed in the book had the good name robbed by being placed in the book without receiving any serious consideration as to being placed in there in the first place. And the thing that I never was, and I'm glad Mr. Taylor is here because he's a smart fella. He speaks at the university. He knows what he's talking about. But how could they have passed a law placing somebody in the book of excluded persons when there was no nexus at all with gaming other than the fact that they were unpopular, and if they went into a casino and some reporter like a John Ralston or one of those fellas came along and they wanted to malign them, would say something that would stick with them forever, and they would be punished as a result of their association. To be quite frank with you, it was macho. To me, association was not a ground to put people in the book. Now, if they cheated in one game, if Jonathan caught them mucking one card, you bar them forever for all I care, but at least you could say there was a reason they were put in the book. But to hear that somebody associated with Spalacho, that just rubbed me the wrong way.
That's Joey Cusimano, right? Yeah.
Well, Cusimano was one. There were others along the line who were put in the book, or at least talked about going into the book. And I felt it became almost a joke when we had these hearings, seeing the chair before Reed, I believe it was Echeverria, was he not?
I don't know. That's before my time. I don't remember.
Well, Echeverria was an attorney, Pete Echeverria, a very powerful attorney in Reno. And he was the chairman of the commission. And he ran it with an iron fist. And he would make fun of these guys. And there was no reason to do that. They should
Oscar, one thing, I have an amazing picture, probably my favorite picture of you ever. Your smile is unbelievable of you, and you're with Anthony Savella and Carl Savella.
Yes.
Were they the only father and son, both in the Black Book, or were there others?
I'm trying to think whether there were...
The Barrs are in there too, William Barr and his son Junior.
Who was it?
The Barrs, they were casino cheats.
I didn't...
Doug Barr, Jr. and Senior.
No, I had nothing to do with them, to the best of...
Savella wasn't in at the same time with his father.
No, and Savella, without a fight, which is the only contact I ever had with Savella where he didn't have a fight. I mean, everything that we did, I brought 2 or 3 cases for him.
Sorry, Oscar. Jane, what do you mean they weren't at the same time? Once you're in, you're in.
Yeah, but when you're deceased, you're taken out. And so he was already deceased.
Oh, okay.
Before we put him in.
Okay, that makes
I can tell you a funny story. I think you'd get a kick out of Mr. Taylor. And that is, Nick was a very good client of mine. He was the supposed head of the outfit in Kansas City, as the mob called itself, or was referred to. And he loved to come to Las Vegas, not to gamble, because he could gamble any place in the world. And he didn't womanize, to the best of my recollection. And there was plenty to drink, I'm sure, in Kansas City. But he came here because he loved Larry Ruvo's mother.
the neck bones.
Neck bones. And she had the Venetian restaurant at the time, and he would come into town, and Ralph Lamb, actually at the airport, waiting to turn around in one of the roundabout jumps that they had. And Nick one day got fed up, and he called me and he said, "I want you to file a lawsuit against these people. I'm not bothering anybody." And I thought I'd get nowhere with a civil rights case, because once it came to the taking of his deposition of my client, they would, of course, assert privilege and not testify, and then the regulatory agents would go to court, and the court would dismiss the case. Well, Nick said, "I want you to sue the sheriff." I said, "It's not going to do you any good, Nick." He said, I don't do this kind of work." I said to him, "Civil rights suits weren't my strong suit." He said, "Well, I want you to learn how to do it and do it, because I'm sick and tired of trying to come to Las Vegas for my neck bones and not being able to have them. I'm not looking to gamble." It got to a point where he was wearing disguises. He had fake toupees on, and I mean, it went to all sorts of problems in order to...
Just for the neck bones. And we did that dinner. We did that dinner in Oscars that one night where we recreated the neck bones. I remember that.
I think it was the best dinner we ever had there, and I don't eat neck bones.
It was a good one. All right, Oscar, we won't take too much of your time. Mr. Taylor, you want to say anything? Bye. Thanks. Any questions for Oscar?
No questions. I'll see you at the Mob Museum.
So that was Oscar in fine form. We miss him. He's the best, and
It was fun.
nice for you to hear his voice again. He does go off on a tangent every now and then. He's got some views that probably better he wasn't here in person for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it allows you to speak, which is always good. But I mentioned it earlier. But like today, it just feels like the modern day crime is so different, and it's more sophisticated gambling, cheats. We see obviously card counters regularly. We see guys changing bets. We see guys hole carding when they spot a weak dealer. None of that is cheating. That's taking advantage of a weak dealer.
Right. The machines are so more modernized now.
But the one that gets me was the Bellagio one that I brought it up earlier. And what were they actually doing, and how did they get away with that for so long?
That was a great case. Went on for quite a while, and they ended up being convicted of over $1 million. That I think they went for 2 years, and Bellagio got wind of it by another employee that just happened to see something and report it. So they started watching him. But craps is an audible game as well, and so there's cameras, angles galore on the craps table, but there's no microphone, and so these guys would call hot bets as the dice were in the air, and as long as the dealer said bet, whatever what the dice land on, they'd pay them. And so these hot bets were pretty dangerous to the property, because if you've got the dealer that's dirty and on your side, you could just say anything, and then whatever the dice land on, well, pay the guy.
Right.
So this went on for a long time. These guys racked up, some of their biggest players all of a sudden are these craps players. And so the Bellagio came to me and were like, "We want them arrested. Just arrest them." Hold on.
They figured out what was going on.
Yeah, but I need somebody on the game. I need to be able to hear it. These guys are going to win. I'd had a case very much like this on a guy named Richard Sequoia Taylor, who had taken millions off of the Strip. And I had followed him from casino to casino. I had a great case on him. We finally arrested him at Mandalay Bay, and we lost that case in court. We didn't have anybody on the game to tell us that bet was bogus. And so all we have is the video. The video looks good. And so you can't really go by theoretical loss or what should have happened. But the odds of them winning as much as they won were astronomical.
Right.
And they did it anyway. And so Bellagio wants us to arrest everybody. I don't blame them, but I said, unless we have it, I don't think we can make the arrest. We're not going to win, even if we make the arrest. So they gave us a couple of weeks to really investigate. We had agents out there that would get on the games, but I think they'd been tipped off, or they were a little bit hinky because people watching. They never did it. The whole time we were watching them, had a guy on the game. And Bellagio would have people on the game too, and we just never got it. So they decided, we're going to fire him. Hopefully you can arrest him. And so I said, well, we'll interview them. We'll see what happens. And so we put them in a holding room and interviewed them one by one. And one of them cooperated. One of them gave it up. And I wouldn't say that it was because of him we were able to arrest him, but it really helped us to be able to prove it out.
A rat gave it up.
I don't want to go that far.
But you never caught them in the act, so they must have been smart enough to know when the people at the table were potential.
Oh, the pit bosses were lousy. The boxman wasn't paying attention. There was so many. I think other people were fired over this thing that should have caught it long before. But the 4 people we interviewed, we did get one of them to cooperate with us, gave us the whole story, admitted to as much money as they had taken, and that is what really springboarded it into a criminal case.
Are they in jail?
Yeah.
They did. All of it ended up in jail. The informant got a much lower, I think 1 year instead of 4. Everybody else got 4.
Informant's the right word.
But all 4 of them were nominated for the Black Book and included. Now Martin had, I think it was Martin had a hearing before. He's one of the very few of all of the ones I was involved in that actually asked for a hearing. And so his argument was that now that he was out of jail, he was going to work for a carpentry company that was going to do work at one of the casinos, and being barred was going to hurt his welfare, his well-being and being able to support his family. And so the commission was kind to him, but they didn't buy it. And they did say later, maybe if you live a good life and stay out of trouble, maybe petition the commission later and you'll have a chance. So maybe one day he'll do that.
It is interesting as the resorts get larger and they have all these other amenities, bowling alleys, movie theaters, all that stuff. Like in Vegas, where can you go see a movie that's not attached to a casino?
There's a couple.
Yeah, I'm saying, but you really have to sort your life out to dance around that.
That is a good point, is that it includes sidewalk to sidewalk.
Right.
So
they can't use the bathroom.
There are
they
a
walk
few,
by and need to pee. They can't pee.
Yeah.
There are caveats, like the Caesars Forum shops are at Caesars, but they're not owned by Caesars.
Oh, yes,
Okay.
the malls that we talked about this in our last episode with Rob Goldstein, but the malls are separate.
So Venetian. So
Go to the mall there, I assume.
The Venetian Mall is second floor,
Yeah.
but it's owned completely. Venetian has nothing to do with it, really.
Right.
So that, again, we wouldn't be able to bring a case if somebody went to that mall.
Interesting.
But
Okay.
if they went to a restaurant or a movie theater or something that was in the license.
Right. So Oscars here would be excluded from anybody.
Oh, yes.
They wouldn't
sure.
be able to come in here.
No way in here, yeah. Stop trying to get me in trouble.
I'm just using it as the example.
So now as we look to the future, do you think the Black Book ever goes away? Is it expanded? Is it something that just stays the way it is? How do you see the future? And obviously the level of crimes have clearly changed over the last 50 years. Do you see that continuing to evolve?
Yeah, I worry about it from time to time, that whether it'll go away. It'll depend on the commission, I guess, at the time, whether they want to include these people. In my last case, like I said before, was Weatherspoon. He was a pimp. He has, in my mind, it's a perfect fit for this. And so, but, I had to really convince the board to do it. I went through 2 different boards to get it on. I got it on, and then when it went to the commission, the chairwoman of the commission hated it. She was very passionate against it. She called me up to testify. Actually, was quite rude in the commission meeting. She felt like that we had forced her hand. That she didn't like this as a tool using the Black Book as a tool this way, but also how do you vote?
Who was that?
Also didn't like that she couldn't vote no to this. I can't vote no to this. And so,
I mean, but in a way, it makes sense because that is somebody bringing the industry into disrepute
Exactly.
within the 4 walls. I have to tell you, it's a crazy thing, and it doesn't seem to be as prevalent maybe in the last couple of years. But there was a window where the prostitutes or fake prostitutes trick rolling men at the high-end hotels was a major problem.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, why wouldn't they go in the Black Book?
all up and down. For
'Cause-
years, Metro wanted people like Suge Knight and others that were causing problems, had convictions, and they wanted a pimp in the book. And I told them, if you bring me I won't bring 5 of them to the board, but you bring me, I don't know this world, you bring me the worst of the worst with what their crimes are. And so Metro presented Weatherspoon to me, and it was a big binder with all of the problems at the casinos, the incident reports the casinos had filed on him for beating somebody or whatever. I reading this was horrible, and this guy shouldn't be anywhere near.
But you got your way. He's in it.
He's in there. He's in there. I can pretty much guarantee that there will not be another pimp as long as we have the same conditions.
Well, it's interesting. Do other states adopt the names that are in the Black Book and utilize them? Because now that you have people that are not maybe, organized crime or gamble, cheats, are other states taking that on, or are they sharing
They
people
will,
that are in
and
theirs?
they do if they're also a threat there. So
Okay.
one of our criteria here is that if you have been excluded from another jurisdiction, that is one of the criteria to exclude you here.
Okay.
But we wouldn't automatically do that. We would have to show, or I always felt like we needed to show that just because they're a mob guy living in New York that's on Atlantic City's list, if I can't show that he ever came to Vegas, I don't know how we show he's a threat to the interest of this state.
Okay.
So we never looked at anybody like that. But there are people that are on multiple lists. Morris is a,
Yeah.
I'm sure we're out of time, but
Now
Morris
that,
is
now that all
another
the states have
colorful character
gaming,
that-
yeah, it's interesting.
and
yeah.
he'd been arrested in Atlantic City and Michigan here. He has a conviction here of entering a casino after being placed in the Black Book. After he got out of jail in Michigan, he came back here.
You asked us, I think, but if they're caught on the premise, they're arrested on the spot?
They can be, yep. They should be.
I-
Gross misdemeanor.
I know Oscar's is getting ready to start to open. I'm sure for the last
Oh.
20 minutes you heard dishes and all that stuff going on in the background. So, number one, we appreciate your time, and I think we have to bring you on and talk more about the actual cheating devices and
Oh,
different
yeah,
things
it'd
like
be fun.
that. Because I know a lot of the
whole
stuff that
nother
you
world.
collected are in the museums, in the Mob Museum and things like that as
some
well.
of the board donated quite a bit. There are some very sophisticated devices that the board is going to, I tried to get it done before I retired, but the board is going to donate the Nick Rash device, some of the other ones we briefly touched on that I'll talk about later, I guess, on another.
That's awesome.
Another podcast.
Thank you again for your time. We got one last question. Do you have any advice or words of wisdom for our listeners?
Or
It's such
people looking to get into enforcement or the industry in any way. You spent 28 years doing it, so
Yeah, I loved it. I had a great career. No regrets at all. I was involved in some of the largest cases in this city over my time. It was a great career. It's probably not for everybody, gaming enforcement, but I think it's a great career. And advice is to keep your nose clean and get a college degree so you can qualify. But advice for the board, keeping people, I hope the book always remains. I think it is a tool to alert the casinos of who is the threat. And I think even with today's nomination of Matthew Boyer, it wouldn't look right if some tourist saw him in a sports book today. He should be barred.
Correct.
And I think there's always going to be a tool like that, whether, Oscar wants to fight the constitutionality of it. I mean, it has been challenged several times with all the different courts over the years, not in my time, but before that, and it's always been, upheld as constitutional. But there is a role for the list of excluded persons if it's used correctly. I would have people call me and say, "Will you put my wife in the book? I've been gambling. She's been gambling too much." It's not used for something like that.
I'm gonna put my wife in the book.
Yeah.
Well, you're fascinating, and thank you for your 28 years of service to the state, and thank you for taking the time to join us on the corner of Main Street. Appreciate you.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
You a fan of On the Corner of Main Street? You're listening, so we'll assume that's a yes. So share the love, rate, review, and tell a friend to subscribe. Also, follow us on Twitter and Instagram @PlazaPod, on Facebook, Plaza Podcast, and feel free to write to the man himself @Jonathan Jossel. We'll see you next time, right here on the corner of Main Street.